which language you choose to learn, you get special things, virtues and values and ways of looking at the world that are entirely unique to that language and culture that you become part of by learning it. And the Welsh language is like that. There are things that you get for learning it. What is the Welsh language? It's a Celtic language of the Brythonic branch, meaning that it is British in origin, spoken anywhere from about 600 to 700,000 people of various abilities. In Wales, which is, if you think about it, the country that is at the center of the British Isles. I'm Ben Llewellyn. We're giving you reasons to learn this language, so let's jump into the video. 7. The fact that you can watch this video from anywhere in the world suggests that the world is in a new phase of its history, because you're part of this community, but you could be sitting in Taiwan, or Argentina, or Ottawa, Canada, and I'm here in Wales teaching you about the Welsh language, and we're forming a community. And one of the things that makes Welsh so special is the kind of community it gives you. Because if I'm on a plane flight to Tel Aviv, and I meet someone else who speaks Welsh sitting next to me, that's really unique, and we can build a bond much easier. It's much more likely. But if I, as a French speaker, am sitting next to someone who speaks French, well, we probably won't talk the whole flight. Not that we would anyway, but you get what I mean. There's no depth just to saying that you are another French speaker or another English speaker, but in Welsh you get that. And in a globalized world, where we're losing traces of our roots, that's really a thing that Welsh has that makes it a good competitor, and the values that it gives you in exchange for learning a language. Because in this age in our history, we want a sense of identity, and smaller languages offer that, where bigger languages do not. You want a sense of place, and as I'll get to later on, the Welsh language is abundant in a sense of place, where you can't feel that sense of place through English because it is so global. Or even languages like Arabic or French, you don't get the sense that you're part of this microcosm that allows you to ferment relationships to a deeper degree, a much more human scale of relationships. And on that same note, heritage, identity, feeling of place, that's all connected. There are a lot of Jones in the world. And if you have that, there's probably that heritage in you somewhere going back to Wales. And in a world where so many places lack any sense of community, the Welsh language is all about community. And that's something that you get for learning it. 6. It is healthy to learn a language. That's proven scientifically. Cognitive benefits. So why learn this language as opposed to other languages? Well, if you know what words mean, and you are intending to live in Wales, or you do live in Wales, or even if you visit, just registering in your mind those place names day to day, that is a health benefit, because your mind is using synapses that it's having to retrain and nourish, and by that it's nourishing you. So health and Welsh and learning language are connected. It keeps you psychologically fit, more optimized for other methods of learning. Hey, if you're liking this content, hit that like button, and don't forget, you can contribute on Patreon. Now, that's not so specific to Welsh, but I did have to include it because our health is really important. So let's get to the next one of these 7 reasons. 5. Doing it for others. The Welsh language is a minority language, but because of its relative strength compared to many other minority languages, and its relative long-term success being next door to English, Other languages like Cherokee and Breton have looked at things that we've done and thought, what can we do? What lessons do they have to learn? And so learning Welsh in a way is doing it for others as well. But also, by joining this community, you are strengthening it. By learning Welsh, you are strengthening it. And by learning Welsh and strengthening Welsh, you are giving inspiration and aspiration to other languages, other minority languages around the world, which makes the world more diverse and a better place for your fellow man. Learning Welsh makes the world a better place. And that's something that you don't always get. Learning a language, you're contributing to the lives of others simply by learning this language. And I think that's something that I can go to my grave knowing that I made the world a better place by the language that I chose to learn. And that, in Welsh, is quite poignant and beautiful, I think. I've heard Irish people comment, well, we have a lot to learn from you, Welsh, in terms of the language. I've seen Canadian tribes look toward Wales and think, wow, that bilingualism thing with the omnipresence of the language works in a way that we haven't tried, and they tried it, and we've really exported this into the world, and we've taken on lessons from other countries too. And by learning a language, you take on lessons of that culture. And there's a lot of ethos in the Welsh culture about contributing to the lives of others. And I think that's a good thing, and it's one of the best reasons for learning Welsh. It is good for others, simply by learning a language that contributes so much to other communities. Poetry. Number 4. Welsh poetry has a fantastic tradition. I mean, we're going back to 600 AD, the oldest and most continuous tradition on this island. It's one of the languages of antiquity in Northern Europe at that. But what makes it so special is we created this thing, vowel harmony, rhyming using consonants to match vowels, cynghannedd. And this developed out of a patronage system. Poets traveling around the country, walking around the country, singing to people for money. And this has embedded itself into our culture. You're not going to get in many other languages around the world. Sure, everyone will have something different, but this is our something different. We, even in today in the Eisteddfod, we continue this poetic tradition. It's never truly gone. It's always been with us. Rhyming and making poetry is essential to Welshness, you know. Having poetry in your soul is a very Welsh idea. From myth poets like Taliesin to modern poets which are symbols of injustices like Heddwyn. We have spanned the centuries, and frankly, looking at English poetry, Shakespeare, for instance, he would have been average in his ability to rhyme in Welsh poetry, but he wouldn't have been the best. That's the level at which constructing rhyming patterns, at least in Welsh, was at, certainly during the Middle Ages, and reading that poetry during my time as a university student was glorious. It enriched me in ways which are still unfolding, and the poetry in Welsh is of many folds. It's layered, it's deep, it enriches you as a human being in ways I don't think many cultures can offer you, and it's one of the things you get in exchange for learning Welsh. A deep, poignant, poetic tradition. 3. Now, Wales is not all of Britain, but the Welsh language comes from all of Britain, in a sense. And I'm not saying that you cannot appreciate the British landscape and the Welsh landscape without the Welsh language, but in some senses you can't, because there are some things that are just seeping out of the language in terms of understanding how we as human beings interacted with the landscape from the earliest roots on this island. And the Welsh language looks at landscape and our interaction and being in it differently to English. For example, right hand, de, is right, and de is south as well. And there's a lot of reference in Welsh to where you are or where things are in relation to height and distance. So iscoed, under wood, uwchcoed, above wood. Whereas you might in English use north and south or cardinal directions, we don't do that in Welsh, because it's less of a feeling of going into the land, but rather than being in it from the start. And I actually think that things like underwood in English are some kind of bringing in from a Welsh or Celtic source, frankly. And we always relate to our position in the land in Welsh. And we have words like bod that begin words, which means dwelling place of. Bod scawen, the dwelling place of the thistle. It's a place not far from here. Bodle, dwelling place. And it senses that there's a sense of place that's deeper in the Welsh language. Like pen means head, but top of, and you have a lot of things, more so than English, that connect senses of an extension of you, in a way, to the land. And I really value this about it. And I think that in learning Welsh, you get a lot more from the British landscape. And this is such a beautiful, beautiful island. I think to fully appreciate the British landscape on a deep, deep level, you need to appreciate the oldest surviving language in it. And I'm very proud that in my entire life I've always had this deep love of the British landscape, that I now speak this language, and it gives me just the love, the weave, the connecting the two is Cyfrdano. It's astounding. It creeps up in places you wouldn't expect. Aberdeen up in Scotland, that Aber estuary opening. Learning Welsh gives you a brilliant glimpse into languages which grew out of Latin, like French, Portuguese, Romanian. Latin has influenced Welsh at least in 4 different major waves. First, in its birth, the rupture of British being fused with Latin to create Welsh in the first place. A lot of our basic words, padell for pan, braich for arm, these are Latin. Llyfr, book, these are basic words. Pot, the same as French, but you pronounce the T. And then second you had ecclesiastical Latin, giving you words like cor, choir, pluif, parish, commendeb, communion, pechod, sin. So many of these words and concepts, even if it's not a direct borrowing from Latin, were taken from ecclesiastical Latin. And then you had French coming in, giving us words like ceffyl, castell, horse, castle, harnais, harness, plien, feather. That may come from the earlier Latin, by the way. You get the idea. And more recently, through English's own Latin, ambulance, you get more and more like this through English. And because of these 4 waves of Latin influence, learning a language like French or Italian or Romanian for a Welsh speaker is going to be very, very easy. But also, as I made a video explaining Dutch and Welsh, because of the influence of early Saxon upon Welsh, learning Dutch is going to be a bit easier. I mean, we've kept quite a few words from Saxon that English has lost by incorporating French. So that's quite interesting. And just by learning the grammar, like when things, initial words mutate, like kind of the gan. He sang a song. That can is song. And it changes. And just knowing like how to conjugate verbs and things like that, it's going to help you learn other languages. Because unlike English, most languages out there do conjugate, and it is going to help you, like it's helped me. And I may make a video on this one, let me know if you want it, but there are something like 35 basic similarities between Welsh and Hebrew and Welsh and Arabic in terms of grammar. And so by learning Welsh, you're going to be able to go into different language groups than you otherwise would just with English or French, and pick up things that are entirely unique to the connections between those languages. Number 1. You shape this language because it is small. You're not in a pool of a billion people like you are with English. Your contribution is more valuable. So I, as a YouTube creator for you, get to make content about Welsh that people hear precisely because there aren't as many people doing it. If you want to come into the Welsh language and create a car company operating through the medium of Welsh, your contribution will be enormous. If you want to write a novel in Welsh, you're more easily heard. You're not swallowed up in these invisible multitudes. You're an individual. You're important in this community, going back to that globalizing effect, making wanting an identity and a heritage important. The end of that result, that process, is that who you are in a smaller language has a greater echo, a deeper sense of meaning and place, going back to the British landscape. You are part of something in a human scale, a human dimension. You're not lost in countries and countries and countries that speak the same language. You are even more unique within a unique community. And Welsh is very unique. And I personally am proud to be part of that community, even if these videos are for the most part in Cymraeg, in English. I'm still contributing and giving back in my own way, and that's possible because of the size of this community. And that's one thing that you get that you'll never get in English, French, Russian, Chinese, Arabic. This human dimension, this human scale. And yes, there's quite it feels claustrophobic at times because of the village sense. But it's something I think that we're all looking for, so it's a good reason to learn the Welsh language. If you enjoyed that video, thank you very much. Hit the like button to let me know you did. And if you are learning Welsh, what was your reason to begin learning Welsh? If you're thinking about it, what reasons would you have? I'm interested in knowing. And if you're a learner of other languages, what were the reasons that you had for learning this language? So let's get a discussion going. Leave a comment in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. Hey, and as always, diolch yn fawr iawn am wylio. Thank you very much for watching. We will see you in the next episode next time.